Judges, and we are in chapter 2. This is a fascinating little section. I'm hoping to cover just the first 10 verses. Part of what makes this interesting to me, you might recall we have the death of Joshua given twice in this first couple chapters. So obviously this is not all strictly straight line chronological. Here I'll throw up a general timeline. We're at the very start of this where it says 1 and 2. That's chapters 1 and 2. Matt, could you check out my pointer and bring that up to me if it works? And it's not always entirely certain where we're at in this, where the break comes after Joshua, and then we go back and, thank you, sir, and get a rehearsal of his death. But so we're in this initial section here. I wish I could give you a real precise timeline, just because I enjoy chronology, but that's not going to be the case. This does seem to be, I'm getting ahead of myself because I haven't even read the section with you. So let's do that. Otherwise you're going to wonder, what is he talking about? And then you're trying to listen to me and read at the same time, and I know how that goes. So, Judges chapter 2, verse 1. Now the angel of Yahweh came up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up out of Egypt and led you into the land of which I swore to your fathers, and I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And as for you, you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall tear down their altars. But you have not obeyed me. What is this you've done? Therefore I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become like thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare to you. And it came about when the angel of Yahweh spoke these words to all the sons of Israel, that the people lifted up their voices and wept. So they named the place Bochim, and there they sacrificed to Yahweh. Okay, now you understand why I was so confused. No, not really. Time-wise, perhaps, but we will read later on, further down, that the Israelites were obedient to God so long as Joshua and his generation lived. And so this seems to be after the death of Joshua that this event happens. Even though in the second chunk here, 6 to 10, we will get a retrospective, I think, and go back and talk about the death of Joshua. The angel of Yahweh came up from Gilgal to Bochim. When you think of the word, when you hear the word angel, you picture a little winged heavenly character created by God? No? You think of Daniel. No, okay. Well, the Hebrew word malach is used 3 different ways. It can refer to human messengers. Clear example in Genesis 23:4, when Jacob sent messengers before him to his brother Esau. He didn't send heavenly angels. It's just the word messengers, and it's used that way in a variety of places. It can also refer to, I'll call them celestial servants of God. Genesis 19, the 2 angels came to Sodom to visit Lot, and one of the things they said was, Yahweh has sent us to destroy it. I throw that in there to indicate to you clearly this is not God himself in Genesis 19. It's his divine is not the right word, his celestial angelic servants. The word can also refer to God himself. Genesis 48, Jacob refers to the angel who has redeemed me from all evil and asks that angel to bless his children. That's pretty clearly a reference to God himself. Angels don't redeem us. God does that. And God also is the one who blesses. Genesis 22, this is when Abraham is up offering Isaac on Mount Moriah. The angel of Yahweh called to him from heaven and says, among other things, you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Who is that? Gabriel? No, that's God himself, referred to there as the angel of Yahweh. Exodus chapter 3, the angel of Yahweh appeared to Moses in a blazing fire in the midst of the bush. And skip over to verse 4, God called to him from the midst of the bush. And I think in context it's pretty clear we haven't changed people, speakers. God is sometimes referred to as the angel of Yahweh as well. So there's three different ways that this word can be used. What is it in our passage here? We have in verse 1, the angel of Yahweh came up from Gilgal to Bochim. Okay, a Christophany or something like that. Yeah, that's a good question. Whether the definite article is always indicative. You know, God told Moses a few times, I will send my angel ahead of you as you go to conquer the land. Not entirely sure if I can tell you exactly what that means either. That if it's God sending, I don't know. But yeah, I would agree with you that this is God himself. Do we have evidence for that other than we feel that way? Yeah, what he said, right? That's your number one hermeneutical principle. Context is king. Look at the context. And what this individual says is God speaking. John?
When it's written in Hebrew and it's talking about Yahweh, are the two written different, or is it one word when it's angel of Yahweh?
No, it's two different words.
So Yahweh calls it?
Yes.
Still messenger?
Yes. Yes.
Written all the time the same way? Messenger, that is.
Yeah, Malach, Malachim for the plural. Yeah, I don't feel like I can say always without doing more study, but yeah, that's typical. So hang on to that thought for a moment that it's God that's the angel of Yahweh here. This is extra, so you don't have to pay attention. It won't be on the quiz. In Greek, we have the exact same phenomenon. The Greek word is not malach, it's angelos, and it's used the same three ways. So the Greek word angel, so we would see this in the New Testament. Luke 9:52, he sent angels, angeloi, on ahead of him, and they went and entered the village of the Samaritans. These are not little shiny winged beings. These are just people going ahead to prepare, messengers. But we do have the word used, angelos, as celestial servants of God. An angel from heaven appeared to him, Jesus in the garden, strengthening him. You could pick dozens of passages that would illustrate that one. And we could pick a number that illustrates the third one. I've just put one in here in Acts 7. The angel who appeared to Moses in the thorn bush, and the angel who was speaking to him on Mount Sinai. We go back to Exodus, and we know who that was. Take off your shoes, Moses. You're standing on holy ground. Why is that? God is here. And if you read through the Exodus account, that's really obvious. Yeah, typically. We are at a bit of a disadvantage because we don't usually think of angel, the English word angel, as covering people and God. We just, in English, we constrict it to just, I'm struggling for the little winged, shiny characters with a halo and playing a harp. Yeah. But that word is more flexible in both Hebrew and in Greek than it is in English. Okay. Well, there I have a couple of examples I mentioned this earlier, God sending his angel. Exodus 23:20, I'm going to send an angel before you to guard you along the way and bring you in peace to the land which I prepared. A couple verses later, verse 23, my angel will go before you to guard you, to bring you into the land. Exodus 32, my angel will go before you. Same thing in Exodus 33. But in this case, the angel speaks and he says, I brought you up out of the land of Egypt, among other things. That was Yahweh. That was God. Okay, so in verse 1, the angel of Yahweh came up from Gilgal to Bochim. Gilgal is located down close to Jericho. You've got a fuller map than this on the back of your handout. So here's Jericho, and Gilgal is somewhere on the plain. The Israelites camped there and set up the tabernacle when they were preparing to take Jericho. There's actually a number of times when we find them there. In Joshua 14, the tribe of Judah came to Gilgal to Joshua to figure out their allotment of land. It wasn't just a pass-through place. There was something special about Gilgal. Later on, it's part of Samuel's annual circuit as he goes from Ramah to Bethel to Gilgal. He makes kind of a circuit there. That's in 1 Samuel 11. Saul's official coronation took place there. You know, he was anointed by Samuel early at Ramah, but then they collected all the people and anointed him officially again, and that was down at Gilgal. What's so special about Gilgal? Later on, Saul was told, go down and wipe out the Amalekites. He goes down, wipes a bunch of them out, brings back the king and a bunch of livestock, and comes to Gilgal. And that's where Saul came down and said, what's this bleating of the sheep that I hear? Did I say Saul? Sorry. Thank you, Daniel. Samuel said that. Why had they come to Gilgal? This is like 400 years after the time we're talking about. It seemed to be a bit of a sacred place. The first place where the tabernacle was set up. after the Israelites entered the land. Show you a couple pictures. There is not a site that has been found that we can say this is Gilgal. And in fact, there may never have been. So when we look for sites, we're looking for cities usually. A bunch of houses together, maybe a wall around it. Gilgal does not appear to have been that. It was more of a campsite, if you will. And it's somewhere on the periphery of Jericho. Here's an aerial shot with a number of places that different people have suggested could be Gilgal, ancient Gilgal. None of them are anything to look at, really. So I'm not going to go any further than that. But he comes up to Bochim. This is the only place in the Old Testament where this place name is given. And, of course, inquiring minds want to know, at least if they're geographically oriented, where's that? And most people say, most scholars, it's Bethel, which of course has a long history in going back to the time of the patriarchs. It's located up on the ridge that runs north-south through the hill country here. That's about 17 miles from where Gilgal would have been, going right past Ai, which is right here. And I wish I could tell you more about this. Where's the tabernacle at this point? Was it down at Gilgal? We know during the life of Joshua it was moved up to Shiloh. So you would kind of expect, if this happens after the death of Joshua, as that appears to be the case, that God would be there. Sorry, I've muddled over this for quite a while, and I don't know everything I wish I knew. But we know they end up at Bethel. And again, why Bethel? That's not where the tabernacle is set up. There is no capital at this period because there's no king. The closest thing you could get by analogy would be Shiloh. But maybe it's irrelevant. I just wish I knew more. It's just off the top of this map, actually. We're going to come back to Timnath-Serah with the death of Joshua. That's where he is buried. That's where his land allotment was. Shiloh would be just off the map up here. So not terrible far away. Scroll down. If only. It would be fun if I actually had access to like Google Earth here, because we could zoom in and show you close-ups of some of these places and actually walk up the route from Gilgal to Bochim. But you're going to have to do that on your own at home. The word Bochim means weepers, those who weep, and we see that at the end of this section. At the end of verse 4, the people lifted up their voices and wept, so they named the place Bochim. That's very fitting. But it appears to be that's the ancient city of Bethel. Or, Abraham had set up a monument, an altar there. And so perhaps it's that is the significance, why they go there at this point. I don't know. Text doesn't say. Came up. That phrase makes sense geographically. This is a significant rise in elevation. Gilgal is down in the Jordan Valley, about 800 feet below sea level. And Bethel is up on the ridge about 3,000 feet above sea level. So in that 17 miles, they go uphill almost 4,000 feet. It's a pretty significant uphill climb. And whoever wrote this down, perhaps Samuel, was well aware of that. So God says to them, I brought you up out of Egypt, verse 1, and led you into the land which I have sworn to your fathers. When they first entered the land, they came in from the east, and here we are looking toward the west from what is modern-day Jordan, across the plains of Moab. You can see about where Jericho is at there. So he's talking about the time when he brought them in from the east. He had sworn this land to their fathers. We often refer to them as the patriarchs. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. That's just a flat-out promise, an unconditional covenant. But he also has something he wants them to do. He doesn't say, I'll never break my covenant, and you can do whatever you want. Part of the covenant, by the way, we read this in Joshua, the blessings and cursings, is that if you obey, I will bless you. If you disobey, I will curse you. And here he names a couple of things in particular. You shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. That's the first one. That one they violated pretty early on with the Gibeonites. Now you might say the Gibeonites fooled them by dressing up like they were from a long way away and bringing old bread and all that kind of stuff. But Israel made a covenant with them minus due diligence. Verify this. Ask God, should we make a covenant with these guys? And so they got duped, and that's one of the things God that calls them on the carpet for. We read last week in chapter 1 that there was quite a bit of Israelites and Canaanites living in the same area together. Doesn't necessarily mean they had a covenant like what they did with the Gibeonites, but that was clearly a violation as well. Sometimes Canaanites living amongst them, and sometimes them living amongst the Canaanites. And he says, that was the first thing. The second thing in verse 2, you shall tear down their altars, but you have not obeyed me. What is this you've done? Give an account for yourself. What's your grand excuse? And obviously, there is none. It's just disobedience. I'd like to know more, too, about this tearing down of altars, because we don't run across, well, I mean, we've got a case like Gideon who tears down his father's altar, but that's an Israelite altar from what we understand, not a Canaanite one. But this verse indicates they did not tear down and I think it's fair to say altar here represents cultic compounds. It wasn't just the little square altar, tear that down and you're good. Those were typically associated with something like a temple and other things. The altar stands for the entirety. Wipe it out. That's what they were supposed to have done. There probably were altars out in the hill country and that kind of thing too, but I think it's pretty clear here what God's expectation was and what they failed to do. Therefore, I also said, verse 3, Judges 2, verse 3, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become as thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare to you. I don't know what version you all using, but do some of you have thorns in italics? Okay, a couple of you have that. It's actually, there's not a word there. They're picking this up. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense without a word like thorns. And this has parallels in a number of other places. I just want to read you a couple of those to show you where they get this suggestion from. Actually, the first one I want to read here doesn't have that phrase, but Deuteronomy 9:4. Don't say in your heart, when Yahweh your God has driven them out before you, because of my righteousness, Yahweh has brought me in to possess this land. But it is because of the wickedness of these nations that Yahweh is dispossessing them before you. So you haven't earned the land by being righteous. In fact, as we will see, the Israelites are as evil, wicked, as the people that got pushed out. And not immediately, but they become that way. And eventually, God has to expel them out of the land too, because of their wickedness. And I think he intends them to realize here, you are here by God's grace, not by some miraculous thing that you have done, some righteous work. Okay, so now I'm going to skip over to Numbers 33. If you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, and we saw in the previous chapter they didn't, then it shall come about that those whom you let remain will become as pricks in your eyes and as thorns in your sides, and they will trouble you in the land in which you live. As I plan to do to them, so I will do to you. Oh, that's not good. We're driving these people out, and God says, if you don't obey me, same fate for you. That's a warning. You picked up there the pricks in your eyes and thorns in your sides. Joshua 23, this is Joshua speaking at the end of his life. Verse 11, so take diligent heed to yourselves to love Yahweh your God. For if you ever go back and cling to the rest of these nations, these which remain among you, and you intermarry with them so that you associate with them and they with you, know with certainty that Yahweh your God will not continue to drive these nations out from before you, but they will be a snare and a trap to you, and a whip on your sides, and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from off this good land which Yahweh your God has given you. So that's a couple examples of where the thorns in the side comes from. Bigger picture, this disobedience of the Israelites is, I'm going to use the word a disappointment to God. It's not the kind of thing he commanded or wanted, but it also was not a surprise. They didn't obey. Well, I thought they were going to obey. No, sorry. It's not that either. This was foreseen. Right? We've seen that in a number of these, and warned against by God. Don't go down that road. Yes?
I always wondered why it talks about thorns in your side. It seems like it'd be easy to get out of your side. I never had thorns in my side.
Yeah, that's true. Uh-huh. Yeah. Uh-huh. I don't know if it's related to walking through underbrush or something. I've done that on occasion. I mean, you try to get through a thick hedgerow or something, and you know. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it is clearly metaphorical. He uses whip in another instance. So yeah, they're gonna be a pain to you. Yeah. Verses 4 and 5. It came about when the angel of Yahweh spoke these words to all the sons of Israel, that the people lifted up their voices and wept. So they named that place Bochim, and there they sacrificed to Yahweh. How would you characterize the reaction of the Israelites here? What's going on? They're sad? Yeah. Was this a renovation in the spiritual life of Israel at this point? Yeah. Yeah, we have clear failures on the part of the first generation. Go back to their parents, dying in the wilderness, complaining about coming out of Egypt. So yeah, there is no perfect they did it right generation. There are individuals that are strong and do the right thing, and sometimes they bring people along with them. It's kind of disappointing. Maybe remorseful because it's not what they expected. Uh-huh. Figured it would be more of a layback and let God take care of it, or I'm not going to go do it today, or that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. But there's some kind of remorse. They weep. They offer sacrifice. But then the text ends there. It's like, so what? What comes about as a result of this remorse? And it's not obvious that anything really good does. Now, our next section, I got 10 minutes, is about the death of Joshua again. In my view, we are now jumping back in time because he wants to say some things about Joshua and this generation. If you're curious, this section, verses 6 to 10, is really, really similar to Joshua 24, 28 to 31. Almost, there's some verses that are in a little different order, but it's almost identical, the same text. So let me read it here. When Joshua had dismissed the people, the sons of Israel went each to, by the way, when, so it doesn't say then. This is not a strictly chronological sequence. It could be, but it's not necessarily. When Joshua had dismissed the people, that's background, the sons of Israel went each to his inheritance to possess the land. Verse 7, the people served Yahweh all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, those who had seen all the great works of Yahweh which he had done for Israel. Verse 8, then Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of Yahweh, died at the age of 110. And they buried him in the territory of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know Yahweh, nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. Oh, man. In some sense, yes. And yet we're going to get more detail, but that does sum it up, doesn't it? So I would kind of take verse 7 to indicate that Joshua had a dampening effect on people's desire to go worship false gods. And once he was gone and the other leaders of his generation, there wasn't much dampening anymore. And stuff just kind of, worship of false gods spread like bindweed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they would have had the Pentateuch, the Torah, and they had Levites who were spread throughout the land who were supposed to teach this, and they had parents in every household who were supposed to teach this. And get to the end of my lesson before I get to through the text, but yeah. Joshua dies, age of 110. I wish I could assign that to a year, but we don't know his birth date. And so we're left hanging. We don't know how old he was at any particular time that can be associated with chronology either. So he lived to a ripe old age, died, buried at Timnath Heres. Let's see here. This is clear up in the upper left-hand corner of your map. There, and in the account in Joshua, it's called Timnath Serah. That second word is reversed. Serah, Heres. I can't explain that for you other than, well, it could be an ancient, you could say it either way, or it could be a scribe accidentally swapped it. But if you go read the Joshua account, all of the other descriptors are identical. The reference to Mount Gaash and all those things, it's clearly the same place. So we know where that is, and that's not terribly far from Bethel. It's in the tribal territory allotment of Ephraim, right almost smack dab in the middle of it. It's about 11 miles from Shiloh, not terribly far from that. So there arose another generation after them who did not know Yahweh, nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. This was supposed to have been avoided. Do you recollect a command to that effect? Yeah. You want me to read the whole passage for you? A couple of verses. Yeah, Deuteronomy 6. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You're supposed to internalize it, not just nod. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. I can't think of many other situations than that. I guess he could have thrown in when you bathe, but that could get a little awkward too. All the time, right? I think too, Daniel, diligent is the key word in there. This isn't a one-time, make sure they've heard it. Diligent, I mean, that's work. That's effort. That's plan. Yeah. So how does a generation arise who does not know Yahweh? Failure to obey Deuteronomy 6. I think we could probably use the word apathy here. Meh, 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 whatever. Yeah, they'll pick it up. We're in the land already. Meh. Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll wrap things up here. Couple things I would take away from this. One is that God was keeping close tabs on his people, and he was urging them to obey. This is not a case of you're in the land, hands off. I have fulfilled my promise. We're done. Do what you want. He's watching everything they do, and he cares. This is not okay, what you guys are doing. And he intervenes. He comes to them and tells them, what you have done is not okay. Man, you would wish that that would change some stuff. He knows what they're doing. He cares about it. He gives them commands. He urges them to do something different. But he doesn't compel them to change. Here's what I want. Here's the direction. Here are many, many reasons why this would be good for you to do. Here are some tremendous reasons you should not go another direction. You got a choice. Reminds me a little bit of Joshua. Choose this day. But as for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord. And God lets them go down the path of sin if they want to bad enough. Now, that doesn't mean he's taking his hands off either. We'll see. He brings in people to discipline them and kind of urge them back to the right path. And then what typically happens over a couple generations? They're back over here. So he continues to be involved, but he doesn't every time an individual sins, smack them on the head. Tells them what to do, lets them make a decision. I wish I could say it was a positive one more often that they chose, but. And here's the other thing I'd take out of here. Our descendants are not born with a knowledge of God. They are naturally ignorant. They don't know anything. These are your kids and mine, and our grandkids and great-grandkids and whatever. Naturally ignorant and rebellious. Right? I wish I could say otherwise, but if you don't know this, if you don't recognize it, you're going to get hornswoggled. You got to realize, and we each were born this way too. Ignorant, no knowledge of God, and rebellious at a very core level. Changing this takes diligence, and I'm getting that out of the Deuteronomy 6 passage. I should probably say, You cannot enforce change from that with your kids. There is no absolute guarantee on any path. But if you want to do the best job possible and the job that God calls us to as parents, grandparents, whatever, it takes work. I like that word, diligence. And that will give your descendants, the next generation, the best possible setup, the best chance of coming to a knowledge of God and being obedient and receiving His blessing. So, I would challenge you guys to do what you can here. Looking around, there's a number of us that are kind of past the direct parenting age. You can be diligent with your grandkids in a lot of cases. Encourage your kids to be diligent with their kids. And I love opportunities that I see folks getting involved in too, CEF and Adventure Club and other ways of teaching kids. Those things don't come naturally to any of us. Each of us had somebody that was diligent with us. And, of course, God called us as well. So some of what we see in here are great examples of how to live, and some are great examples of how not to live. And this is one of those how not to live. They messed up. Hello, it's a flag, it's a warning. Be different than that. I think that's his point. Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
It mirrors how even in today's society we're one generation away from not knowing who God is.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But by the grace of God, there go we. Yep, absolutely. Okay, let me pray and we can be dismissed. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for the material here in Judges. We recognize how interested and involved and invested you are in your people, in this case, the Israelites, but we know that applies equally to us. You want us to do what is right. You want to see us prosper. You want to bless us, but you also expect obedience and diligence, hard work. Help us to do that. Help us not to be lazy and apathetic, but to give serious thought to what we are doing to further your kingdom and to obey you. Give us wisdom and insight there, and change our hearts, and to give us an urge to work hard and to be obedient to you, honoring you through the things that we do and say and think. In your name I pray. Amen.